Just try to picture this for a second. An empire so massive it stretches all the way from the foggy shores of Britain to the deserts of Mesopotamia. An empire that held the entire Mediterranean Sea just inside its borders. That was the Roman Empire at its peak, a single unified world. But, no empire lasts forever. So what happens when a superpower on that scale finally collapses? Well, that's exactly the story we're diving into today.
Yeah, it's a huge question, and it's one that keeps coming up throughout history. When Rome, the absolute superpower of its time, finally fractured, it didn't just vanish into thin air. No, it shattered, like a piece of glass, and its legacy was picked up by three very distinct and often competing heirs. This is the story of that great fracture.
All right, so how did it all start to come apart? Well, the first thing you need to know is that it wasn't some big, dramatic Hollywood-style invasion that did it in. Nope. Like with so many great collapses, it started from the inside out, with cracks appearing right in the foundation. To understand this, we need to get one key term out of the way: barbarian. To a Roman, pretty much anyone living outside their borders was a barbarian. It was this big catch-all term. It didn't matter if you were from a Germanic tribe like the Franks or the Vandals or anyone else. If you weren't Roman, you were a barbarian. So it wasn't about race or a specific culture. It was just a label that meant foreign, uncivilized. Basically, not us. And here's the thing. For hundreds of years, these Germanic tribes weren't really a major threat to Rome. Not an existential one anyway. But then came the 3rd century, and bam, everything changed. The empire gets slammed by this massive economic and social crisis. And this, right here, is the key takeaway. It wasn't that the barbarians suddenly got super strong overnight. No, the game changer was that Rome itself became incredibly weak from the inside. So, faced with all this chaos, Emperor Theodosius does something drastic. He makes a fateful call. He splits the empire right down the middle. The logic was pretty simple, right? Make it smaller, make it easier to govern and defend. But wow, the results could not have been more different for the two halves. Over in the West, with its old capital of Rome, you get one weak emperor after another, and the whole thing just collapses. But the East, centered on the incredible new capital, Constantinople, it not only survives, it thrives for another 1,000 years. Okay, so let's focus on the West first. What happened after it fell? You'd probably imagine it was just complete and utter chaos, right? The end of civilization. But that's not the whole story. What actually rose from the ashes was something totally new, something forged in the fire of that collapse. What we got was this fascinating hybrid, a Romano-Germanic world. As the old Roman trade routes fell apart and the cities got dangerous, people moved to the countryside. Society became way more rural, and land became the new currency of power. But, and this is super important, Roman culture didn't just get wiped out. Far from it. Think about it. Languages like French and Italian, they literally evolved right out of Roman Latin. The laws became this cool mix of Roman legal ideas and Germanic customs, and maybe most important of all, the new Germanic rulers eventually converted to Roman Catholic Christianity. That kept a huge piece of the Roman legacy alive. And out of this new mix, one family, one dynasty really starts to dominate. We're talking about the Carolingians. It all starts with this guy, Charles Martel, famous for stopping the Muslim expansion into Europe. Then you have his son Pepin the Short, who officially becomes king. But the real superstar is the grandson, Charlemagne. This guy was an absolute force of nature. He conquered huge territories, and in a moment packed with symbolism, he's crowned Roman emperor by the Pope himself on Christmas Day in the year 800. But here's the catch. This new Roman Empire in the West was incredibly fragile. Sure enough, after Charlemagne dies, the whole thing gets carved up between his three grandsons. And this split, which was made official by the Treaty of Verdun, was way more than just a family disagreement. It literally drew the early borders for the future kingdoms of France and the Holy Roman Empire. So that dream of a new unified West, yeah, it was pretty much over before it even really got started. All right, so that's heir number one. Let's shift gears and talk about heir number two. Because while all this was happening in the West, the Eastern Roman Empire wasn't just hanging on. It was, in many ways, flourishing. This was the piece of Rome that just flat out refused to die. We call it the Byzantine Empire now. And under Emperor Justinian I, it hit an incredible peak, a true period of great splendor. Justinian had this one massive ambition: to put the old Roman Empire back together. He launched these huge military campaigns to take back North Africa, Italy, even parts of Spain. His goal was to make the Mediterranean a Roman lake all over again.
And for a little while there, he came incredibly close. Constantinople became the undeniable center of the world, the economic and cultural capital, a shining beacon. But even with that ambition, the East and West were just growing apart. Politically, culturally, they were becoming two different worlds. The final, decisive break happens in the year 1054. That's when the Christian church officially splits in two. So in the West, you get the Roman Catholic Church, with the Pope in Rome as the big boss. And in the East, you have the Orthodox Church, which looks to the Patriarch in Constantinople. This is known as the Great Schism, and it created this deep religious and cultural rift that, is still with us today. Okay, time for our third and final heir. And this is the one that nobody in the Roman world could have possibly seen coming. Because out of the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, a brand new power, fueled by a brand new faith, was about to explode onto the world stage. It all starts in the early 7th century. A merchant by the name of Muhammad starts preaching a new monotheistic religion, Islam, meaning submission to the one God, Allah. He faced a lot of resistance in his hometown of Mecca, so in the year 622, he and his followers made a journey to the city of Medina. That journey, called the Hijra, was such a pivotal moment that it marks year 1 on the Islamic calendar. So what was this new faith all about? Well, at its core, it's built on 5 key principles, which you probably know as the 5 pillars of Islam. You've got faith in one God, prayer 5 times a day, charity to the poor, fasting during the holy month, and the pilgrimage to Mecca. These weren't just rules, they were a powerful, unifying framework that gave this new civilization its structure and its incredible momentum. And boy, did it have momentum. The expansion of Islam happened at a speed that is just staggering to think about. In just over 100 years, Islamic armies conquered huge swaths of former Roman land. We're talking Egypt, Syria, and then they just swept all the way across North Africa. This new empire was led by a series of caliphates. You can think of a caliphate as a kind of political and religious empire ruled by a successor to the Prophet Muhammad. And their capitals moved as the empire grew, from Medina to Damascus in Syria, and eventually to the fabled city of Baghdad. So there you have it, that single unified Roman world. It was gone for good. And in its place stood 3 separate, vibrant, and often conflicting civilizations, all of them, in their own way, heirs to Rome's legacy. This was the new state of play. The Mediterranean Sea, which for centuries was basically a Roman lake, was now the great frontier between these 3 new worlds. You had the Catholic Romano-Germanic kingdoms in the west, you had the Orthodox Byzantine Empire in the east, and you had the massive dynamic Islamic caliphates in the south. And really, the next 1,000 years of history were all about how these 3 worlds interacted, how they fought, how they traded, and how they learned from each other. And that really gets us to the final, most important point of all this. The fall of Rome wasn't just some dusty old ending. It was, in so many ways, the beginning of the modern world, the one we live in right now. When you think about the deep cultural and religious lines that divide, say, Western Europe from Eastern Europe, or both from the Middle East, those lines were drawn right here during this period. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Where else in our world today can you still see the echoes of this great fracture?